I'm Clara Bennett, 34, and I was up to my elbows in greasy dishwater in a forgotten diner when a man in a crisp suit walked into the kitchen. "Pardon me, are you Clara Bennett?" he asked. I was holding a scorched frying pan, my hands raw and chapped, and my ex-husband's voice was a cruel echo in my mind from 6 months before. "No one is ever going to want a failed chef like you. Right. Nothing screams culinary artist like scraping burnt eggs off a pan at 10 p.m. on a Wednesday." I set the pan down, wiping my hands on my stained apron. "That's me," I said. "If you're here about a debt, this apron is pretty much all I have to my name." He offered a small, polite smile. "My name is Arthur Vance. I'm the lawyer representing the estate of Eleanor Bennett." My breath caught in my throat. Aunt Eleanor, the woman who taught me everything after my parents passed away, who sparked my passion for cooking, who shut me out when I chose marriage over my apprenticeship 12 years ago. "Your great-aunt passed away 2 months ago," Arthur continued. "She left you her entire estate. Where are you all watching from tonight? Let me know in the comments below, and please hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt like you were at the very bottom, just before life decided to hand you the most unbelievable opportunity. You'll want to stay tuned for what came next. 6 months ago, I was comfortably upper middle class. I had a beautiful home, a marriage, and a culinary degree I hadn't used in a decade. My ex-husband, David, always insisted my working was pointless. "I earn more than enough for us both," he'd say, as if it were a grand romantic gesture and not a leash. When I found out about his affair with his paralegal, my whole world collapsed. The divorce was a nightmare. David had a team of shark-like lawyers. I had a public defender and a dwindling sense of hope. He kept the house, the cars, the savings. I got a single suitcase and the stark realization that our prenup was unbreakable. His final words to me: "Good luck finding anyone who will take on your baggage." So, I'd been surviving by taking any kitchen job I could find, washing dishes, prepping vegetables, anything to afford the tiny room I was renting. It wasn't a career, but it was survival. Arthur gestured toward a sleek black town car waiting outside. "Perhaps we could discuss this somewhere more private." I looked down at my food-splattered clothes. "I'm not really dressed for a town car." "You are the sole beneficiary of a $28 million estate," he said with unwavering calm. "The car will survive a bit of grease." 28 million. The number felt like a foreign language. I followed him in a complete daze. Arthur gave me a thick folder as the car pulled away from the curb. "Your aunt left you her Chicago penthouse, her classic car collection, several investment portfolios, and majority ownership of Eleanor's Table." The restaurant was worth an estimated $28 million. I stared at pictures of the iconic restaurant I'd only seen in culinary magazines. Eleanor's Table, my aunt's life work, a 3-story establishment known for its blend of classic French technique and innovative American flavors. "There has to be a mistake," I whispered. "She disowned me 12 years ago." Arthur's professional demeanor softened slightly. "Ms. Bennett never officially removed you from her will. You remained her sole heir. However, there is a condition." Of course there was. "What condition?" "You must assume the role of executive chef at Eleanor's Table within 1 month and maintain that position for a minimum of 1 year, during which time the restaurant must earn a James Beard Award nomination. If I refused or failed, the entire estate would be donated to the Culinary Institute of America." I let out a hollow laugh. "I haven't been a chef in a decade. I graduated at 22, married at 22. My husband thought my culinary ambition was a quaint hobby." "Ms. Bennett believed you would find your way back to the kitchen," Arthur said gently. "This is her way of ensuring it." The car stopped in front of a luxury hotel. "You will stay here for the night. Tomorrow, we fly to Chicago to meet with the restaurant's board. You have 29 days to make your decision." I looked at the folder on my lap, at photos of the life I had given up for a man who had discarded me like yesterday's trash, the life Aunt Eleanor had always envisioned for me. "I'll do it. I said. When do we leave? Arthur smiled. 8 a.m. Pack what you have. Everything else you need is waiting for you. I glanced at the small duffel bag in the diner's locker that held everything I owned. Trust me, I said. Packing won't take long. The hotel suite was more luxurious than any place I had ever lived, even with David. As I scrubbed the grime from under my fingernails, I saw my reflection. Sunken cheeks, tired eyes, hair that desperately needed a cut. This is what David had made me. I remembered being 21, in my final year of culinary school. David was 33, a successful lawyer, handsome and persuasive. He had come into the restaurant where I was doing my final externship, a place where my graduation tasting menu had earned a rave review from a local critic. Aunt Eleanor had been so proud. You have the gift, Clara, she'd said. Next year, you'll come to Chicago. We'll set the culinary world on fire together. David overheard. He introduced himself, praised my food, and asked me out. In 6 months, we were engaged. In 8, we were married. Aunt Eleanor refused to attend the wedding. You're making a terrible mistake, she told me over the phone. That man doesn't see a partner. He sees a pretty hostess for his dinner parties. You're willingly locking yourself in a gilded cage. I was young, foolish, and thought I was in love. You're just upset because I'm choosing my own life, I'd snapped. No, she'd said, her voice heavy with sadness. I'm heartbroken because you're abandoning the one you were meant to live. But you are an adult. It's your life to throw away. We never spoke again. Not when I sent birthday cards. Not when I called on her 70th birthday. Not even when I needed her most. David's control had started subtly. He suggested I didn't need to look for chef positions. Take some time to enjoy being a newlywed, he'd cooed. Then he discouraged me from staging at high-end restaurants. Why add that stress? When I started a small catering business from home, cooking for neighbors' parties, David would plan spontaneous weekend trips, making it impossible for me to fulfill orders. Eventually, I just gave up. My only act of defiance was my continued study. Cookbooks, food science journals, online masterclasses. When David was out of town, I filled countless notebooks with recipes I'd never serve, menus I'd never create, a culinary dream that lived only on paper. David found them one day. What a cute little hobby, he'd said with a dismissive wave of his hand. But let's focus on the house. The partners are coming over for dinner. I ordered room service, the first decent meal I'd had in months. I looked up Eleanor's table online. The website was sophisticated, showcasing dishes that were both works of art and technical masterpieces. I found her official biography, a photo of her from a few years back, steely-haired and formidable, standing in her immaculate kitchen. The bio mentioned she was a widow with no children, but I had been like a daughter to her once. After my parents died in a car crash when I was 16, Aunt Eleanor took me in. She nurtured my love for food, let me experiment in her kitchen, and taught me to taste things I'd never noticed before. She paid for my culinary school, championed my talent, and I'd traded it all for a man who thought a soufflé was just a fluffy omelet. My phone pinged. A text from Arthur. A car will be at the lobby at 8 a.m. Bring your belongings. You won't be returning here. I looked at my pathetic duffel bag. A few changes of clothes, my laptop, and 12 notebooks filled with a decade of recipes. That was it. I spent the entire night reading through those notebooks, tracing my own evolution as a chef. The early recipes were derivative, mimicking Eleanor's style. But over the years, I'd developed my own voice. Farm-to-table ethics mixed with molecular gastronomy. Dishes that were both comforting and challenging. David's opinion didn't matter now. It had never really mattered at all. At 8 a.m. sharp, I was in the lobby, my duffel bag in hand and my shoulders back. Arthur was in the car, waiting. Did you sleep? He asked. Better than I have in a long time. So, what's the plan for Chicago? First, the penthouse. Then, a 2 p.m. meeting with the board. They are expecting you to refuse the offer. Most of them have been planning to dismantle the restaurant and sell the real estate. Why would they assume I'd refuse? Arthur gave a thin smile. Because you've been out of the industry for over a decade. Most people would find the challenge daunting. Good thing I'm not most people. And for the record, I know a lot about food. I just haven't been allowed to cook it. Boarding the private jet felt surreal. Yesterday, a diner kitchen. Today, soaring towards Chicago. Tomorrow, running a world-famous restaurant. The universe certainly had a strange sense of timing. The Chicago skyline rose to meet us as we began our descent. I'd never been. David preferred beach resorts where he could control every aspect of our itinerary. The car moved through streets I'd only seen in shows, then pulled up to a magnificent building on the Gold Coast. The penthouse was on the top floor. "Welcome home," Arthur said. Have you ever had a moment where your life felt like it was shifting on its axis? Tell me about it in the comments below, because I'm still trying to understand that feeling years later. A woman in her late 60s with a kind face stood by the door. "Ms. Bennett, I'm Helen. I was your aunt's assistant for 35 years. She paused, her eyes misty. "I remember you too from after your parents. You were so young, so lost." I did remember her. A warm presence who always had a cookie for me when I was hiding in Eleanor's library. "Helen," I said, embracing her. "Thank you for looking after her. Welcome home, dear. Your aunt never gave up hope that you'd find your way back." The penthouse was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows with a panoramic view of Lake Michigan, art on the walls, and a kitchen that was a chef's fantasy. This wasn't just an apartment. It was a testament to a life built on passion and excellence. "Your aunt's bedroom is on the east wing," Helen said, leading me down a hall. "But she had the west wing converted into a test kitchen for you. She had it done 9 years ago." I stopped dead. 9 years ago? But we hadn't spoken in years. Helen's smile was tinged with sadness. "Ms. Eleanor never stopped believing you'd come back to your senses. She said you had too much fire in you to let it be smothered forever. She kept this space for you, for when you were ready." The test kitchen was beyond my wildest dreams. Top-of-the-line equipment, a massive marble island, a walk-in pantry, and shelves filled with every cookbook imaginable. On a steel rack, hanging alone, was my old chef's knife roll from culinary school. I touched the worn leather, tears welling in my eyes. Aunt Eleanor had kept it. "She was so proud of you," Helen said quietly. "She told me your talent was being wasted, but that it wasn't lost. She knew you'd find your way back to it one day." Arthur appeared at the door. "The board meeting is in 1 hour. Would you like to get ready?" Helen had arranged for clothes to be delivered. In the walk-in closet, I found a row of perfectly tailored suits. I chose a charcoal gray one that made me feel like the chef I should have been all along. Downstairs, a man in his late 30s was speaking with Arthur. He was tall, with dark, intense eyes that seemed to see right through you. "Clara Bennett," he said, holding out his hand. "I'm Marco Velez, the sous chef at Eleanor's table. I worked with your aunt for the last 10 years. "The Marco Velez? Your work with modern Spanish cuisine is incredible." His eyebrows shot up in surprise. "You follow my side projects?" "I follow everyone's work. I may not have been in a professional kitchen, but I never stopped being a chef." His expression changed from skeptical to intrigued. "Then perhaps you're not just Eleanor's charity case after all." "Good. The board is planning to eat you alive." "Marco," Arthur warned. "No, it's fine," I said. "He's right. They think I'm going to fail. Aunt Eleanor must have known they would." Marco smiled faintly. "Eleanor said you were a prodigy, but that you'd been beaten down. She said the woman who showed up today would tell us if the prodigy had survived." I thought about David, about the greasy diner, about Aunt Eleanor building this kitchen for me, waiting. "Well then," I said, "let's not keep them waiting." The offices of Eleanor's table were above the restaurant. Staff members paused and stared as we walked through. In the boardroom, 7 people sat around a large mahogany table, their expressions ranging from neutral to hostile. "Ladies and gentlemen," Arthur began, "this is Clara Bennett, Eleanor Bennett's great-niece and the new majority owner of this establishment." A man in his 60s with a florid face leaned back. "With all due respect, Ms. Bennett hasn't worked in the industry for over a decade. This move suggests Eleanor's judgment was failing her at the end." "Actually, Mr. Peterson," I said, my voice even, "my aunt's judgment was perfect. She knew this restaurant needed a fresh perspective, not the same old ideas clinging to a bygone era." I pulled out one of my notebooks. "This is a concept for a tasting menu focused on sustainable local ingredients, using techniques I've been developing for the last 5 years. Rainwater-fed microgreens from the rooftop garden we will build, zero-waste butchery, in-house fermentation. I have 11 more notebooks just like it. A decade of recipes created in secret because my ex-husband thought my passion for food was just a cute hobby." Peterson glanced through it, his expression dismissive, but I saw others at the table lean in, intrigued. A woman spoke up. "Even if your ideas are solid, running a kitchen of this caliber requires leadership, supplier relationships, managing a team." "You are absolutely right," I agreed. "Which is why I will be leaning on the existing team, especially on Marco. I'm not here to claim I know everything. I'm here to learn, to lead, and to honor my aunt's legacy by pushing it forward. If any of you are unable to work for someone who values innovation over comfortable stagnation, you're free to go." Arthur produced a stack of contracts. "Those who wish to remain will sign new employment agreements. Those who don't will receive a generous severance package. The deadline is the end of the day." As the meeting broke up, Marco came over. "That was impressive. You alienated half the board, but the half that actually cares about the food now respects you." "Did I alienate you?" "Eleanor told me a year ago that if she passed, I was to help you. She said you had been buried for too long, and that when you finally got out, you'd be a force of nature. I think she was right." I looked out the window at the bustling Chicago street. She usually was, though her taste in board members could use some work. "Peterson looks like he thinks truffle oil is fine dining." Marco laughed. "You're going to fit in just fine." My first week was a baptism by fire. Marco was my guide, walking me through the kitchen's operations, introducing me to suppliers, and explaining the staff dynamics. It felt like coming back to a home I'd never known. "Your aunt had a unique way of running things," Marco explained as we stood in my new office. It was Eleanor's old space, mostly cleared out except for a few personal items, a well-worn copper pan hanging on the wall, a leather chair that still smelled faintly of her lavender perfume. "Let me guess," I said. "Demanding, brilliant, never satisfied." Marco chuckled. "Basically, she demanded perfection but gave you the freedom to achieve it your way. She'd rather see a glorious, ambitious failure than a safe, boring success." I understood that. Aunt Eleanor had been like that with me when I was a teenager. My computer chimed. It was an email from Peterson to all senior staff. "Effective immediately, all menu changes must receive full board approval before being implemented." I looked at Marco. "That's not how Eleanor did things." "No, Eleanor was the final word on food. Peterson is trying to cut you off at the knees." I hit reply all. "This new policy is rescinded. Eleanor's table achieved its status because we trust our chefs. Board approval is only required for capital expenditures over $50,000, as per the corporate bylaws." "Thank you." Send. Marco's eyebrows went up. "You just publicly humiliated him." "Good. David spent 12 years making me doubt every instinct. I'm done letting men tell me I need their permission." Peterson replied in minutes, demanding a private meeting. I agreed, with Marco present. When Peterson stormed in, his face was red. "Ms. Bennett, I am trying to safeguard this restaurant's legacy." by subverting protocol and trying to undermine the executive chef? An interesting approach. Your aunt left me 30% of this company. I've been here for 20 years. I won't let you run it into the ground. I leaned back in Eleanor's chair. Let me be perfectly clear. My aunt left me controlling interest. You can either work with me or you can work against me. But if you choose the latter, you will lose. I suggest you take the weekend to decide which course of action best serves your financial interests. After he was gone, Marco let out a low whistle. Where did that come from? I smiled, though my hands were trembling slightly. From 6 months of washing dishes for minimum wage and deciding I would rather burn out on my own terms than fade away on someone else's. That evening, as I was exploring the office, I found a set of locked filing cabinets. Helen had the key. Inside were folders, labeled by year, with my name on them. My culinary school report cards, articles about my wedding, photos of me and David over the years, my smile looking more forced in each one. In the most recent folder, there were clippings about my divorce, court papers detailing how much I had lost, and underneath it all, a letter in Eleanor's elegant script, dated just 2 months before her death. Clara, if you are reading this, it means you finally came home. I am sorry for my pride. I should have reached out 100 times, but I was so hurt that you chose him. By the time I was ready to swallow that pride, it felt like too much time had passed. I watched from afar as you made yourself smaller each year. I wanted to rescue you, but Helen said you had to find your own way out. She was right. You had to choose freedom for yourself. This restaurant was always for you. From the day you first stepped into my kitchen at 16 and perfectly replicated my most difficult sauce, I knew you were my successor. Not because you are my blood, but because you have the gift. Your test kitchen holds something for you in the bottom left cabinet. Use it well, and Clara, I am proud of you. I was always proud, even when my stubbornness wouldn't let me say it. E. At the penthouse, I found the cabinet in the test kitchen. It was locked, but a small key was taped to the underside of the counter. Inside were a dozen thick, leather-bound journals. They were Eleanor's private recipe books. Not the polished, published versions, but her working notes, her messy experiments, her failures, her breakthroughs. Each book was a year of her culinary journey. This was a treasure. A note in the last book made me break down. These are my mistakes, my bad ideas, the dishes that almost worked. I'm giving them to you because young chefs need to know that even the greats stumbled. Use them to learn, to teach, and to remind yourself that genius isn't born. It's built, one imperfect dish at a time, just like you are building yourself back now. Love, E. By the next morning, I had a plan. When Marco arrived at the restaurant, I was sketching furiously. What's going on? A new apprenticeship program, the Eleanor's Table Fellowship. We'll bring in young chefs from disadvantaged backgrounds. We'll show them these journals, give them real-world kitchen experience, a paid apprenticeship with actual creative input. Marco looked over my notes. That's a huge undertaking. Expensive. Time-consuming. That's the entire point. We're not just making food. We're building the next generation of chefs. Eleanor would have wanted this. She would have, Marco agreed, his voice soft. You're not just trying to fill her shoes. You're building your own path, just like she hoped you would. I looked up at him. Thank you for not making me feel like I have to prove myself to you. You did that on your first day. The rest is just a bonus. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I opened the text, and my blood ran cold. Heard about your good fortune. Guess you landed on your feet after all. We need to talk. D. David. He must have seen an article about Eleanor's will. Of course. I showed the text to Marco, whose expression hardened. Do you want me to take care of it? I looked at David's pathetic attempt to slither back into my life, now that I was no longer a penniless dishwasher, and felt nothing. Just a hollowed-out sense of pity. No, I said, deleting the message and blocking his number. He's not worth a response. He's a forgotten ingredient in a much better recipe. And it was true. David was becoming a ghost at the feast, a bitter taste that was quickly fading. The Autumn Harvest menu was my first major debut as executive chef, a showcase of everything I believed in: local, seasonal, innovative. The centerpiece was a dish I'd designed years ago in one of my notebooks: a slow-roasted duck with a sauce made from foraged berries and herbs. Jacob called it a masterpiece. Eleanor would be, well, she'd find one tiny fault with it, but she'd be secretly thrilled. The launch night was a press event, scheduled for 7 p.m. At 6:45, I discovered that our main walk-in refrigerator had failed. The temperature was rising, and half of our mise en place for the night was at risk. "What's happening?" I asked the kitchen porter. "The compressor just died, chef. No warning." "Looking for a solution?" Peterson stood in the doorway, a smug look on his face. Terrible timing. Someone must have overlooked the routine maintenance schedule, right? And I'm the Queen of England. But I didn't have time for a confrontation. I looked at the ingredients we had that were still safe, my mind racing. I had 15 minutes to redesign half the menu. "Everyone, listen up!" I called out, my voice clear and steady. "Change of plans." Panic, postpone, admit defeat, or do what Eleanor would have done. "The theme tonight is no longer just Autumn Harvest," I announced to the team, grabbing a new set of pans. "It's the beauty of resilience." I moved to the pass, pulling ingredients, my hands moving with a confidence I hadn't felt in over a decade. I started calling out new dishes, combinations I was creating on the spot. The scallops are out. We're doing a seared polenta with wild mushroom ragu. The beef tartare is now a roasted quail with a cherry reduction. "Marco, get me the cherries from dry storage now." The team, seeing my focus, snapped into action. It was chaos, but it was controlled chaos. I wasn't just cooking, I was conducting an orchestra. I explained the changes to the front-of-house manager. "Tell the guests that due to an unexpected equipment failure, the chef has created a unique one-night-only menu to celebrate the art of improvisation." The most feared food critic in Chicago, Julian Croft, was in the dining room. I had 30 seconds to decide what to send to his table. I took the duck, my signature dish, and plated it myself. But instead of the original sauce, I created a new one on the fly, using ingredients that hadn't needed refrigeration. It was bolder, more intense, a risk. After service, which ended in a round of applause from the dining room, I finally allowed myself to breathe. Marco was grinning. That was the most incredible thing I have ever seen in a kitchen. Someone sabotaged the walk-in. This was planned. I know. Peterson was talking to a new repair company yesterday. Said he was getting a quote for an imminent failure. It doesn't matter. He wanted you to fall apart. Instead, you showed everyone you don't need a perfect plan. The talent speaks for itself. That night, I called an emergency board meeting, with Arthur Vance present as counsel. "I want to talk about what happened tonight. Our refrigerator was deliberately sabotaged to ruin a critical press dinner." Peterson shifted in his seat. "That's a wild accusation." "Is it?" "Because I had our security chief pull the logs. The regular maintenance check was canceled last week, and the order came from your computer at 4:15 p.m. on Tuesday." The room went silent. Peterson's face turned ashen. "I was simply reviewing vendor contracts. If something was canceled by mistake—" "There was nothing accidental about it," Marco said coldly. "I was testing her," Peterson finally snapped. "Eleanor left her legacy in the hands of an amateur who hasn't cooked in 12 years, I laughed. "You wanted to see if I would crack, Mr. Peterson? I spent 6 months scrubbing other people's filth off plates just to eat. Your little games don't even register. But risking the restaurant's reputation to soothe your fragile ego makes you a liability." I stood up. "So here is what will happen. You will tender your resignation immediately. In return, the company will purchase your 30% stake at its current market value, and you will sign an ironclad NDA. Or, I will file a report with the police for criminal damage and sue you for the reputational harm which will ruin you in this city. You have until noon tomorrow to decide. After the meeting, Marco found me looking out at the city lights. You handled that with grace. Did I? I kind of wanted to throw a pan at his head. But you didn't. You gave him an out that protected the business while neutralizing the threat. That's real leadership. Eleanor used to say the mark of a great chef isn't how they handle a perfect service, but how they handle a disaster. I turned to him. Marco, why are you really on my side? You could have fought me for control. He was quiet for a moment. Eleanor asked me to. That's true. But I'm not doing it for her anymore. In 1 month, you've brought more life back into this place than I've seen in years. The fellowship idea, the way you talk about ingredients, the way you treat the dishwashers with respect. You're bringing the soul back. He took a step closer. And because I saw you in the kitchen tonight, the way you moved, the way you commanded the space with your entire being, that's not someone faking it. That's someone who's been starved and is finally getting to eat. There was an intensity in his voice that made my stomach do a flip. This wasn't just about professional admiration. Marco, I began, but he just shook his head slightly. I'm not going to make things complicated. You just escaped a terrible marriage. You're finding your footing. I just wanted you to know that I see you, the real you, and she is magnificent. He left before I could think of a reply. Peterson resigned the following morning. The company bought his shares, which I used to create a bonus pool for the entire staff. The biggest threat to my leadership was gone, but I had a feeling the real tests were only just beginning. 2 weeks after Peterson's ousting, Helen found a small, locked diary tucked away in Eleanor's desk. Ms. Bennett, I think you should see this. Your aunt kept a private journal. A lot of it is about you. The diary spanned the last 12 years, from just after I got married until the week she died. The entries about my marriage were gut-wrenching. March 15th, 12 years ago. Clara married David Foster today. I did not go. Helen says I am being cruel. Perhaps she is right, but I cannot bear to watch that girl walk willingly into a prison. December 8th, 11 years ago. A friend in her city told me Clara isn't cooking. David won't allow it. My brilliant girl is being suffocated by domesticity. I want to call her. Helen tells me I must not. She says Clara has to see the bars of the cage for herself, that my interference would only make her defend the jailer. I hate that Helen is always right. July 22nd, 9 years ago. I hired the contractors to build the test kitchen in the West Wing today. Helen thinks I am a sentimental old fool, preparing a space for someone who may never return. But I have to believe she will. The kitchen is an act of faith. April 8th, 5 years ago. Saw Clara at a benefit dinner. David had his hand on the small of her back all night, steering her like a prized mare. She looked gaunt, exhausted, her smile like fine china about to crack. I tried to catch her eye, but she looked away. I don't think she even notices it anymore. The slow, steady erosion of her own soul. January 30th, 3 years ago. Heard from a reliable source that David is having an affair. Everyone seems to know but Clara. A part of me wants to expose him, but Helen is right. She has to find out on her own. It's the only way she'll gather the fury she needs to leave. November 11th, 2 years ago. Updated my will. Everything to Clara on the condition she run the restaurant and win a Beard nomination. Marco thinks it's a cruel test. Maybe, but this place was always meant to be her canvas. She just needs to be reminded she knows how to paint. September 4th, 1 year ago. The doctors say 6 months, maybe less. I am not afraid of dying, but I am terrified of the thought that Clara might spend the rest of her life in that mausoleum of a marriage. All I can do is leave her the tools to rebuild her life once it finally shatters. December 20th, 6 months ago. Clara has filed for divorce. Thank God. This is it. The divorce will be hell, but she is stronger than she knows. March 8th, 8 weeks ago. I am fading faster now. The pain is a constant companion, but I feel at peace. Arthur has his instructions. He will find Clara after I am gone. The rest is up to her. She will either rise to the challenge or forge a new path. Either way, she will be free. It's all I ever wanted for her. Always, Eleanor. I sat in her office, the diary in my hands, tears carving paths down my face, a mix of grief, gratitude, and a profound love for the woman who had built a kitchen for me 9 years before I knew I would need it. She loved you so much, Helen said from the doorway. Everything she did, even her silence, came from that love. She feared that if she pushed, you would only cling to him harder. So she waited. And she made this place ready for you. I wasted so much time. No, dear. You learned the lessons you needed to learn. Eleanor knew that. That night I called Marco. Can you come to the penthouse? There's something I need to show you. He was there in 30 minutes. I handed him the diary. He read for nearly an hour in complete silence. When he was done, he looked at me, his eyes full of a deep, quiet understanding. How are you? She understood me better than I ever understood myself. Marco moved a little closer on the sofa. For what it's worth, she was right. The Clara who commanded that kitchen during the blackout could not have existed without the Clara who survived David. She mentioned you. That you would help me. I didn't know about the diary, but yes. She talked to me about you a year before she died, said her brilliant niece was wasting away, and that when she finally broke free, she would need an ally who wouldn't try to tame her. Is that why you've been so kind? A promise? It started that way, Marco admitted. But Clara, I stopped doing this for Eleanor weeks ago. I'm doing it because I get to watch you come alive every single day. That's not a promise. That's a privilege. He took my hand, his touch gentle but firm. And if I'm being completely honest, it's becoming more than a privilege. But you just got out of a war. I'm not going to be another battle. I looked down at our joined hands. What if I'm tired of fighting alone? Marco smiled, a real brilliant smile that lit up his whole face. Then we figure it out, at your pace, no pressure, just 2 chefs in a kitchen, creating something new. We stood on her balcony overlooking the glittering city, and for the first time in more than a decade, I felt a flicker of hope, not just for my career, but for my life. Eleanor had given me back my craft, but she'd also given me a chance to believe in myself again. She had shown me that sometimes, the people who love you the most have to let you shatter, because they know it's the only way you'll learn you have the strength to put yourself back together. The best inheritance wasn't the money or the restaurant. It was the belief that I was capable of creating something magnificent out of the ashes. The Eleanor's Table Fellowship launched 3 months after I took over. We received over 500 applications for just 10 spots. Marco and I spent weeks poring over essays and recipes. This one, I said, pointing to an application from a young woman named Sofia Ramirez. She's been cooking in her family's food truck since she was 14. She wants to learn how to blend traditional Mexican flavors with classic French techniques. She's raw talent, Marco said, studying the file. No formal training. Neither did I, when Eleanor first took me in. That's the whole idea. The fellows arrived in September, wide-eyed and terrified. I gathered them in the main dining room. Your being here is not an act of charity, I told them. It's an investment. Eleanor Bennett believed that talent is universal, but opportunity is not. You will work on every station. Your ideas for dishes will be heard, tested, and sometimes they will end up on the menu. Welcome to Eleanor's Table. Sophia approached me afterwards, her hands trembling. Chef Bennett, thank you. My parents wanted me to be a nurse. I smiled. Let me guess. They said cooking was a nice hobby but not a serious profession. Exactly. How did you know? Because anyone who doesn't understand a passion will always try to shrink it down to a size they can comprehend. My ex-husband spent a decade telling me my dream was a silly little fantasy. Don't ever let anyone make you small for dreaming big. The program was intense. The fellows worked alongside the line cooks, learning, absorbing, growing. Some of the older chefs grumbled, but most were inspired by their energy. By November, Sophia's idea for a deconstructed mole dish had caught the attention of a writer from a major food magazine. They wanted to feature it, with Sophia credited as the creator. This is too soon, Sophia worried. I'm not ready. You're a chef in this kitchen. Act like one. The project became Sophia's obsession. Critics questioned if we were exploiting the fellows for cheap labor and ideas. I addressed the controversy in an interview. The Eleanor's Table Fellowship isn't about free labor. It's about breaking down the barriers that have kept kitchens staffed with the same type of people for generations. Sophia comes from a family of immigrants. She could never afford to take an unpaid internship. Programs like ours are a promise that in this industry, your talent can matter more than your pedigree. The article went viral in the food world. Within a month, 3 other high-end restaurants announced similar paid apprenticeship programs. You're changing the culture, Marco said one night. I'm just doing what Eleanor taught me. Though I'm sure she'd have a sarcastic remark about it taking me 12 years to get the message. Marco had become my constant. My partner in the kitchen, and, increasingly, my best friend. The chemistry between us was an undeniable hum in the background of our long workdays. We'd kept it professional, but that resolve was tested at the restaurant's holiday party in December. I'd spent the afternoon with Sophia, helping her prep for a TV segment. She was confident, articulate, a leader in the making. I arrived at the party late, feeling proud and genuinely happy. Marco found me by the bar, his tie loosened. You missed the speeches. Let me guess. Everyone thanked everyone, Peterson's name was never mentioned, and one of the sommeliers got a little too into the vintage champagne. He grinned. Word for word. You know this place too well. The band started playing a slow song. Marco held out his hand. Dance with me, Clara. I hesitated. It felt like a line we hadn't crossed. But then I looked at his kind, steady eyes and thought about Eleanor's diary, about building something new. One dance. He pulled me close and we moved together easily, silently. Clara, he said, his voice low. I know we said we'd keep this professional. We did. And I know you're still healing. I am. But I have to tell you something. I'm in love with you, not falling, not getting there. I'm there. I will wait as long as it takes, or I will walk away tomorrow if that's what you need. But I couldn't let another year start without you knowing. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Part of me screamed to run, to retreat to the safety of being alone. But a bigger part, the part that had learned to take terrifying risks, wanted to leap. I'm scared, Marco. David broke my trust in my own judgment. What if I'm not ready? What if I ruin this? Then we'll fix it together. I'm not David. I don't want to change you. I love who you are. The brilliant chef who can create a menu in 15 minutes and who champions young talent. That person doesn't need fixing. I kissed him, right there on the dance floor in front of our entire staff. It was impulsive and messy and probably unprofessional, but it was honest. When we broke apart, the music had stopped. Then one of the line cooks started clapping, and soon the whole room was applauding. I hid my face in Marco's shoulder, laughing. Well, he said, his grin wide. So much for professional boundaries. Eleanor always said the best dishes come from taking big risks. I guess that applies to life, too. What do you think is going to happen next for us? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because our story was about to face a challenge no one saw coming. My relationship with Marco was both a seismic shift and the most natural thing in the world. At the restaurant, we were partners. After hours, we were just Clara and Marco, slowly, carefully learning each other. He understood my flinches, my moments of doubt. Unlike David, who had needed me to be small, Marco seemed to celebrate my growth. "Tell me about him," he said one snowy January night. "Tell me about David." I tensed. "Why?" "Because I see you bracing for impact every time you succeed. You're waiting for me to become him. I need to understand what he did so I can be the opposite." I'd never told anyone the details, but with Marco, it felt safe. He had a way of making me feel like I was always too much and never enough. My passion for food was obsessive. My quiet moments were boring. When I got excited, I was hysterical. When I was sad, I was dramatic. There was no way to win. That wasn't about you, Clara. That was about his own insecurity. I know that now, but for 12 years I believed it. I kept shrinking myself, trying to fit into the box he'd built for me. Spoiler alert, it never worked. He cheated anyway. Marco took my hand. "Clara, you are the most vibrant person I have ever known. Your passion isn't too much. It's what makes you, you. The day you walked into that boardroom and refused to be intimidated, I knew you were going to change this place." I kissed him, feeling the profound difference between being cherished and being managed. "I love you," I said, the words feeling both terrifying and true. "I'm still learning how to do this without being afraid, but I love you. We'll learn together. That's the point. We're a team." In February, the Big Food magazine feature came out. It wasn't just about Sophia's mole dish. It was about the fellowship, about my story. From dishwasher to running one of the country's top restaurants, the response was instantaneous. Our reservations book exploded. Other chefs called to congratulate me, and my visibility brought the past roaring back. David called on a Tuesday. I was in a menu planning meeting when his name flashed on my screen. I'd never bothered to delete his contact. I ignored it. He called again, then a text. "Saw the article. Very impressive. We should talk." I showed Marco, who scowled. "Block him. I want to see what he wants." The next text came. "I know I made mistakes. I see that now. Coffee? For closure?" I laughed out loud. He wants closure now that I'm successful. "You're not going." "Of course not, but I am going to reply." I typed, "David, you spent 12 years trying to convince me I was nothing without you. You left me with nothing and told me no one would want me. You were wrong. I don't need your approval now, and I certainly don't need your closure. Do not contact me again. Send. Block. Delete." It felt like taking a deep, clean breath after years of breathing stale air. Marco pulled me into a hug. "How do you feel?" "Free. He doesn't get to be a part of this story." But David wasn't done. He found Sophia on social media, claiming to be an old friend. She told me immediately. "Some guy named David Foster messaged me, said he was your ex, and that he was proud of you. I told him I don't talk to strangers about my boss. Was that okay?" "That was perfect, Sophia. If he messages you again, block him." His final attempt was a letter from his lawyer, requesting a meeting to discuss a mutually beneficial business opportunity. Marco read it, his face tight with anger. "He wants you to invest in his new firm. He's trying to use your success to bail himself out." Of course he is. His whole life is about taking from others. I had Arthur draft a formal response. "Ms. Bennett has no personal or professional interest in Mr. David Foster. Any further attempts at contact will be considered harassment and will be met with legal action." That should have been the end of it. But then a former acquaintance called me with a warning. "Clara, you should know, David is telling everyone you manipulated your dying aunt, that you stole the restaurant." I should have been furious. But all I felt was a profound sense of pity for him. He was so small that his only recourse was to try and tear me down. "Let him talk," I told Marco. Anyone who matters knows the truth. The rumors, however, reached Eleanor's old circle, leading to an invitation to a gallery opening from Julian Croft, the critic who had been at the restaurant on the night of the blackout. He was a close friend of my aunt's. "I've been hearing some nasty rumors, Clara. I'd like to hear your side of things." I went with Marco. The gallery was full of Chicago's culinary elite. Julian greeted me warmly. "You have your aunt's eyes. Same fire." "I hear there are questions about my inheritance," I said directly. Julian smiled. "My dear, the people asking those questions are irrelevant. Eleanor spoke of you constantly in her final years. She was so proud of you, even though she was too stubborn to tell you. She showed me your food blog from years ago. Said you had more talent in your little finger than she had in her whole hand." By the end of the night, I had spoken to a dozen of Eleanor's friends. They all told me the same thing. Eleanor had been waiting for me. "Your ex is just a bitter little man," one famous chef told me bluntly. "Eleanor always said you can judge a person's character by how they react to the success of others. He's showing his character to the world." Driving home, Marco asked, "Do you regret it? The marriage? All that lost time?" I thought about it. I regret believing his lies, but I don't regret the journey, because it brought me here. If I hadn't hit the absolute bottom, I don't think I would have had the courage to take on this challenge. Spring arrived, and with it, the James Beard Award nominations. We were on the list for Best New Restaurant. The news sent a jolt of energy through the entire staff. But success attracts sharks. A rival restaurateur, Marcus Thorne, who had tried to buy the building from Peterson, started a smear campaign. He hinted to reporters that our fellowship was exploitative, that I was a flash in the pan riding my aunt's coattails. "Standard jealousy," Marco said. "Ignore him." But I was done being silent. When Thorne wrote a guest column in a trade paper criticizing our stunt of a fellowship, I wrote a response. My piece was titled, "Setting a New Table: Why the Future of Food is Inclusive." I detailed our fellowship structure, the fellows' salaries, the mentorship. And then I went for the jugular. Marcus Thorne inherited his restaurant from his father. I don't begrudge him his privilege, but I do question his attempt to kick the ladder out from under the next generation. The question isn't whether programs like ours are fair. It's whether this industry can finally evolve beyond a system of gatekeeping that serves only the privileged. The article exploded. Young chefs shared it. Culinary schools added it to their curriculum. Thorne looked like exactly what he was, an entitled man afraid of change. Eleanor's friends wrote letters to the editor in my defense. The support was overwhelming. But the attention also brought an unexpected offer. A major streaming service wanted to produce a documentary series about the restaurant, the fellowship, and my story. "This is a massive platform," our PR director said, "but it would mean putting your entire life, your past, under a microscope." I looked at Marco. "What do you think?" "I think you'll do what you always do, but be sure you're ready to talk about David on camera." That night, we discussed it. If I do this, they'll want to talk about the divorce, about why Eleanor and I were estranged. They'll want me to talk about the emotional abuse. As I said the words, I realized something. David wasn't the story. Eleanor was the story. My comeback was the story. David was just the catalyst. "I'll do it," I told Marco, "but on my terms. This is a story about food, mentorship, and legacy, not a reality TV show." Filming began in May. For 2 months, a small crew documented our kitchen, the fellowship, the lead-up to the awards. They interviewed Helen, who spoke about Eleanor's faith in me. They interviewed Sophia, who talked about how the fellowship had changed her life. And in my interview, they asked about David. Sitting in Eleanor's office, I kept it brief. I was married to a man who needed me to be diminished so he could feel powerful. The divorce was financially devastating but emotionally liberating. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself. The interviewer pushed for more details. I just smiled. The details aren't important. What's important is that I survived, and I built something beautiful out of the rubble. That's the story. He's just a footnote. The series was rushed into production to air before the awards ceremony. The response was bigger than any of us could have imagined. Letters poured in from women who saw their own stories in mine. And of course, David called. He got a new number. I was at dinner with Marco when it rang. "Clara, it's David." I put it on speaker. Marco took my hand. "How did you get this number?" "I saw the show. You made me sound like a monster." "I never said your name, David. If you saw yourself in that story, that's on you. People know it was me. Our old friends, my colleagues. You're ruining my reputation." I laughed. A real, genuine laugh. "David, I don't think about you at all. I don't care about your reputation. I told my story. If you're uncomfortable with it, perhaps you should reflect on your own actions. I want a public apology, a statement that you embellished things. No, I'm going to say this once. You spent 12 years trying to erase me. And now that I've built a life you can't control, you want to edit my story? I don't owe you a thing. Not my silence, not my comfort, nothing. You are a footnote. Lose this number." I hung up and immediately called Arthur. "David just threatened me. I need a restraining order." "Consider it done. And Clara, I'm proud of you." Back at the table, a woman from the next table leaned over. "I'm sorry. I couldn't help but overhear. I saw your documentary." "Thank you. My sister is in a marriage just like that. Maybe your story will help her see a way out." The James Beard Awards were in October, a year after I'd first walked into the restaurant. Walking the red carpet with Marco, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible. We won. Best New Restaurant. Standing on that stage, I held the award and looked out at the crowd. "A year ago," I began, "I was washing dishes, convinced my life was over. I thought I had lost everything. But my great-aunt, Eleanor Bennett, left me something more important than a restaurant. She left me a second chance. She believed that the best food and the best lives are built on a foundation of resilience. This award is for her. And it's for every young chef who has ever been told their dream is too big or that they are too small. Our table is big enough for everyone." The applause was deafening, but what came next was a shock. After the ceremony, Marcus Thorne approached me. "That was a hell of a speech, Bennett, and a hell of a year. You've beaten me at every turn." He handed me a folder. "My firm wants to acquire Eleanor's table. The offer is $100 million. I stared at him. $100 million. I would personally walk away with over $50 million. "It's a trap," Marco said under his breath. "He'll buy it, gut the fellowship, and turn it into another one of his soulless steakhouses." "The offer is real," Thorne said. "I know when I'm beaten. Absorbing your brand is my only move left. With your 51% share, the decision is yours." "No," I said, without a moment of hesitation. "Clara, that's life-changing money," one of my board members who was standing nearby whispered. "You have to consider it." "I don't. Eleanor didn't save me from a life of obscurity, so I could sell her legacy to a man who stands for everything she despised. The answer is no." The board member looked shocked, but then a slow smile spread across her face. "That's exactly what we were hoping you'd say. Eleanor left a provision in her will. We weren't to tell you until after you'd been in charge for a year and faced a major buyout offer." She handed me another envelope. "If you rejected the offer, a second trust would be unlocked. $30 million, unrestricted, for proving that some things aren't for sale." I was speechless. He tested me. Even from the grave, she was testing me. "She had to know you valued the work more than the money," the board member said. "She had to know you would protect the mission." I thought about it. A year ago, I might have been furious at the manipulation. But now, I understood. She wasn't controlling me. She was showing me who I was. I feel like she knew me better than I knew myself. A year ago, I might have taken the money. But this place isn't just Eleanor's legacy anymore. It's mine. And it's not for sale. That night, Eleanor's lawyer gave me one last thing, a small, velvet box. Eleanor said to give this to you when you passed her final test. Inside was a simple, beautiful ring, an intricate design of a chef's knife wrapping around the band. A note read, "Clara, if you are reading this, you passed." This was my mother's ring. She was a cook, too, in a time when women were only allowed in home kitchens. She never compromised. I promised I would only give this to someone worthy of her spirit. That person is you. Cook bravely, live boldly, and never, ever let anyone make you small again. I am so proud of you. E. I slipped the ring on. It was a perfect fit. Later that night, Marco found me in the test kitchen, the ring gleaming under the lights. "What are you thinking about?" Eleanor planned all of it. The challenges, the tests, all to prove that I was the person she believed I could be. "Are you upset?" "No, I'm grateful. She didn't just give me a restaurant. She gave me a series of impossible tasks that forced me to become the woman I was always meant to be." Marco wrapped his arms around me. "You know what I think? I think Eleanor knew you'd pass every test because you have something Thorne and David will never understand." "What's that?" "The ability to build people up, not tear them down. That's why I fell in love with you." He pulled a small box from his pocket. My heart stopped. "Sophia Hartfield, I'm not doing this because of some test. I'm doing this because my life is better with you in it, and I want a lifetime of better days. Will you marry me?" I looked at the simple, elegant ring, then at his hopeful face, then at the kitchen around me that Eleanor had built for me. "Yes," I whispered through tears. "Yes, 1,000 times. Yes." He slipped the ring on my finger next to my great-grandmother's, a new beginning, resting beside an old legacy. "Should we tell people?" I asked. "Actually," he said, pulling out his phone, "I already told Helen to have champagne waiting. She's been planning our wedding since the day you hired the first fellow." We went downstairs to find Helen beaming. "It's about time," she said. "Ms. Eleanor would be so happy." "She probably planned this too," I said, laughing. "She probably has a letter somewhere saying you were the one." "Actually," Helen said, walking toward Eleanor's desk, "she does." She returned with an envelope addressed to both of us, dated the week before Eleanor died. "Marco and Clara, if you are reading this together, then my plan was more successful than I could have dreamed. Marco, you were the son I never had. Clara, you were the daughter I always wanted. I can't imagine two better people to lead my restaurant or to lead each other. Build something beautiful. And for heaven's sake, don't name any of your children Eleanor. Love, E." We laughed and cried, raising a glass to the woman who saw our future before we did. The lawsuit arrived a week after our engagement was announced in the papers. David was claiming that my culinary knowledge, developed during our marriage while he financially supported my hobby, was a marital asset, and he was entitled to 50% of my inheritance. "It's a spite suit," Arthur said over the phone. "It has no legal merit, but he's trying to bleed you dry." "He's doing this because I'm happy." "Exactly. Which is why we are going to bury him. Clara, I need any evidence you have that he actively suppressed your career." I thought of my old notebooks, not the recipe books, but my diaries. "I kept journals," I said. Finding them was an ordeal, buried in a storage unit I'd forgotten about. Marco came with me. I read an entry from 7 years ago. David told his boss at a dinner party that my culinary degree was adorable. When I corrected him later, he told me I had embarrassed him by being too aggressive. I apologized. My God, Marco, I apologized for having a dream. The journals were a damning record of a decade of quiet cruelty. Victoria's team used them to build our countersuit, emotional distress, defamation, and career sabotage. David's lawyers immediately offered to drop his suit if we dropped ours. Absolutely not, I told Arthur. He doesn't get to start a war and then walk away when he sees he's going to lose. Let's go to court. I walked into that courtroom with Marco by my side, feeling nothing but resolve. Richard's confident smirk faded as the judge read our countersuit. Mr. Foster, the judge said, his voice laced with ice, claiming your ex-wife's education as a marital asset when you actively prevented her from using it is not just legally frivolous, it is morally repugnant. Motion to dismiss, with prejudice. You will pay Ms. Bennett's legal fees. I suggest you thank your lucky stars she isn't pursuing this further. Outside, reporters swarmed. Ms. Bennett? A comment? My ex-husband tried to destroy my career, and then, when I succeeded without him, he tried to claim credit for it. Today, the court confirmed that his only contribution to my success was leaving me. His chapter in my life is now, finally, closed. The clip went viral. His reputation was ruined, not by me, but by his own greed and cruelty, finally brought into the light. That night on the rooftop, Marco asked, "So what's next, Chef Bennett? You've won every battle." I pulled out a sketch from my pocket. I want to use the $30 million from Eleanor's final trust to start a foundation. We'll build and run community kitchens in underserved neighborhoods. Not soup kitchens, but beautiful, dignified restaurants that will provide culinary training and serve healthy, delicious food on a pay-what-you-can model. We'll call it Eleanor's Table for Everyone. Marco studied the sketch. That's a legacy. It's our legacy, I corrected him. We were married in the spring, in the small garden on the restaurant's rooftop that Eleanor had loved. Sophia was my maid of honor. Our vows were simple. We promised to be partners, to celebrate each other, and to always, always save the last bite for each other. As the party wound down, Helen gave us a final gift from Eleanor. It was a portfolio of her last unbuilt designs, not for restaurants, but for community kitchens, homeless shelters with gardens and culinary schools. Her note read, "My dearest children, I never had time to build my dreams for a better world. Now they are yours. Build them together." And we did. 5 years after I walked out of that diner, I stood giving the commencement address at my old culinary school. Your journey will have unexpected detours, I told the graduates. You may get lost. You may even feel like you've failed. But you can't ever truly lose yourself. Your passion, your talent, that's always there, waiting for you to come home to it. You are all chefs. You know how to create something beautiful from scratch. Apply that same skill to your own lives. Build yourselves carefully, honestly, and courageously. And if life ever burns everything to the ground, remember, you are the ones who know how to rebuild from the ashes. The applause was wonderful, but the real reward was a text I got that night from Sophia. Just won my first James Beard Award. Thank you for opening the door. I smiled, typing back, You walked through it all on your own. I joined Marco on the rooftop, our rooftop, and looked out at the city lights. Theodore had given me more than a restaurant. He'd given me the chance to learn that the greatest comebacks aren't about reclaiming what you lost. They're about becoming the person you were always meant to be. And that was an inheritance worth fighting for. I hope you enjoyed tonight's story. Be sure to follow and click that little bell because I'll be back with a new story for you tomorrow, just like I am every day. If you'd like to hear another story about a life changed in an instant, click on one of the videos you see on the screen now. See you soon.